Hey everybody, this is Tony.
And this is Paul, and we're coming at you from the Friends for Life podcast, where we discuss the ongoing lives and issues of people with developmental disabilities to spark positive change in the field.
And we have a lot of fun doing it.
Making sure that individuals are reaching the goals they have set for themselves. That's one of the many goals of Assured Health Services. If you're looking for a residential care provider or searching for ADS services, Assured Health is your go-to place. Assured Health, helping others succeed. Learn more at assuredhealthohio.com or call 419-442-8066.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Friends for Life podcast. Thanks for tuning back in. Today, we are joined by Sarah and Erica. How are you both doing this wonderful afternoon?
Fantastic. Thanks. How are you?
Doing great.
We're
Feeling
happy
good?
to be back. I mean, we've just been traveling everywhere, and we've kind of missed our own studio.
Yeah. I opened the doors this morning, and I was like, I haven't been in here in a long time. This is kind of weird. It's like going back to school after summer break, you know?
Right? Yeah, it smells different.
Oh, yeah, that's funny.
So, we're here to talk about some stuff today about MUIs and things of that nature because a lot of people are terrified of them. It's like the boogeyman of the DD world. Yeah. But, firstly, we really want to know how both of you got started in the DD field, because that's always the most interesting story to me, how you ended up here, because it's, as I say every time, it's not a common path. It's not a common route.
It's not.
It's definitely not. So I started 30 years ago. I had just graduated college, and I was a poor college kid with that fantastic 4-year psychology degree that you can do so much with.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't want to go back to school any longer, so I applied for a position at one of our providers, and I started doing direct care and truly had absolutely no idea what that meant. And so when I started my first week of training, my boss came to me and asked me, she said, we have an individual who's having kind of a rough time, wondered if you'd be willing to work with him. And since I had so much vast, extensive knowledge of the field, I said, sure. Yeah. And I started working with him, and he was going through a really rough time. And at one point, I think about a month in of working with him, I wasn't really sure that I was doing good work. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, I said his name, and I said, I don't know if you feel safe with me. I don't know if you want me around you. I don't know if I'm doing anything to help you. And I think I'm going to ask my boss to move me. Now, mind you, this is an individual that had profound DD. And he was in the middle of kind of destroying his room, and he dropped what he was doing and he ran over to me. He sat down next to me. He laid his head on my shoulder, and he took his hand and he rubbed it across my face. And I said, okay, I'll stay. And that was kind of it for me. I really felt like I had found what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so I've just kind of worked up through that system. I worked at that provider for almost 6 years. And when I left, I was a QIDP is what they call them now, and started working for another company called Community Living Options that's no longer in service, but we did quality assurance and service coordination before there were SSAs. And then that company was being dissolved, and I started working at the county board in the major unusual incident unit. So I've been there for 20 years.
Wow.
So
It's a long time. It's always, I think the thing that we find is it's either they've been there for like a really short period of time, or they've been in the field for a very long time.
Yeah.
And you're in the long time group. So
Yep.
Erica?
Well, I always like telling people that I knew I was going to be a dentist my entire childhood. Like, literally was going to go to U of M's dentistry school.
Mm-hmm.
So
Let's
I
go
went
blue, though.
Yeah, so I applied for Eastern Michigan because they do in-state tuition for Ohio residents. And I was like, I'm going to be there for 2 years, and then I'm going to transfer over to U of M. And my freshman year at Eastern, I was taking prerequisites, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't like science. I hate biology. I can't stand chemistry. I'm not good at any of this. And then my sophomore year, I took my first, as an elective, like abnormal psychology is what the title was, and I fell in love with it. And like right there on the spot, I was like, I'm changing my major. I'm going to be a psychology major. So I moved back home after I graduated, and again, so much you can do with that 4-year psychology bachelor's. But I started working for a mental health organization, and they have a program that's like a partial hospitalization program with TPD schools.
Okay.
TPS schools. And I was a case manager in a classroom, and I moved throughout that program for 7.5 years. So I was a case manager for elementary kids, who I loved, middle school for about 2 weeks, emotions and hormones and stuff I don't do well with. And then I was with the high schoolers the rest of my career, which I loved the high schoolers. They were amazing. But I was also in like my early 20s, so you probably had more in common.
Exactly. Yeah. I was.
But I also knew that every morning when I was standing at the front door to the classroom, welcoming everybody in, and these are kids that got kicked out of their public school for their behavioral, mental health, developmental disabilities, that combination. I very rarely got greeted back with a good morning, Miss Erica. So I knew after about 7 years, like, I can't continue to do this. So I went back to Eastern, got my social work degree, my master's degree. And I had some friends who I used to work with at the school that had applied and become SASs at the board, and they were like, come here. And I was like, okay.
Sounds good.
So yeah, I was an SSA for 7 years. I transitioned into the MUI unit about maybe 5 years ago. And then only after a year and a half of being an IA, they opened up a secondary coordinator's position. So
Which I was happy to see you get.
that's where I was. So yeah, good times.
Me too.
Fun times.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Friends for Life podcast. Thanks for tuning back in. We have Kelly and Sherry here today to talk about Special Olympics. How are you both doing this afternoon?
Doing well. Fabulous. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Well, we've had some previous conversations about Special Olympics, but before we dive into the heavy stuff or the detail of what Special Olympics is all about, especially here in Northwest Ohio, how did both of you get involved in working with Special Olympics? Because, it's not a common route.
So I started at the board 30 years ago. I just had my 30-year anniversary.
Congrats.
And I started volunteering with Special Olympics my first year working for the board. Played unified softball for about 8 years and bowled. I knew this was always my dream job. But we work in a facility where the jobs have to come up for bid. So when this job came up for bid 10 years ago, I jumped on it.
Yeah.
And best decision I ever made. So absolutely love my job.
Wonderful. Sherry?
And I started with the board 15 years ago about, and I was an SSA at the time, and I actually volunteered as a coach for Special Olympics basketball and got my foot in the door that way, and then got the opportunity to, after I got my master's degree, they needed a coordinator, and one of my programs is Special Olympics, and again, it's just awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
We both love sports, so that helps too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I heard some comments about the football posters on the way in here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
the
we're
awesomeness of it.
Unfortunately, we're both
All right, we're
Browns
done
fans.
with this.
Browns and
We're
Ohio
both Browns fans
and
too.
the Ohio State
yeah.
Wow.
University.
I feel sorry for you
I
guys.
know.
The Reliable Drug and Alcohol Testing Clinic is a leading provider and convenient source of pre-employment and occupational type testing. Their clinic provides services to a wide range of private businesses, healthcare facilities, and municipal and county courts. Reliable is an independent, locally owned clinic. As a result, they provide their services at a lower cost than the major hospitals, have faster turnaround times on test results, and eliminate the long waits typically incurred at these larger facilities. To learn more, visit reliabledrugtest.com. Kathy, welcome to the
Yes.
Friends for Life podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We're excited. We're out here in Dayton. It's a beautiful day. We're supposed to
is.
have a blizzard tomorrow, so we're
Yeah.
going to get into
I actually saw some sun on the way down here. Like
Well,
it was
and
it was
that's-
overcast, but it was something.
That was very lucky because
Yes.
we have not had sun. It's been very dreary.
Ah man.
Even the snow on Sunday was kind of gray. I don't know.
Well, so the first things first, how did you end up
working here at the county board? Because, not everybody gets into this disabilities field. As we kind of talked about earlier, disabilities stuff is always kind of tucked
Right.
away and hidden. So what brought you here?
Well, I've been in the field for a really long time. Actually, we can go way back, but it'll
Way
be a quick
back.
story. When I was in college, I was a physical education major, kindergarten through 12th grade. And luckily, part of my training was we had to take a class where you worked with children who had some type of disability.
Mm-hmm.
So when I did that, I decided this is really more what I want to do instead of teaching, working with the quote normal kids. I just really fell in love with it. So I taught adapted phys ed for many years. Did a few other things. I worked at a couple different county boards doing teaching and doing a few other things. And then I moved, I've always lived in Montgomery County.
Mm-hmm.
So then I took the job here in Montgomery County and I worked at a day program. And then the county they stopped operating their day programs and everything kind of privatized. And then I took this job with the recreation department. So I've done like a lot of things. And
Yeah. It's good to have a broad range of things that you do. So, a doctorate of psychology. What made you want to choose that? That seems like a very intense and difficult path. I had a friend and when we started college together, he wanted to be a psychologist, and they told him how long it would take. He's like, I think I'm going to be a police officer. He didn't do it.
Right.
So why?
Well, so I got bachelor's degrees in college in criminal justice and psychology. And by the time I finished college, I pretty much knew I wanted to do something along those lines, be something in both fields. And so my first thought was the FBI really sounded interesting. And I thought that might be a job that I would do well at. And then I saw the government pay scale for those positions for FBI agents. I was like,
I'm good.
Yeah. So I thought about law school. I decided that really wasn't a route I wanted to take. So, people really interest me. Pretty complex. When you think about complexity, I don't know if there's much else that is more complex than kind of dealing with people and figuring out the motivations and how people are affected by different things in their lives. And so I went to graduate school to become a psychologist.
THS Remote Supports is clearly focused on improving independent living through dynamic and personalized services. Their systems have been carefully developed and perfected to ensure that everyone receives the best care through the least intrusive means possible. Located in Cincinnati, Ohio, they've spent over 20 years providing in-home supports to individuals with disabilities. If you or someone you know is looking for a remote service provider, go to thsrss.com or call 513-882-9088.